Welcome to Intelligent Investor Insights with Joshua Barone, your host and guide through the noise of today's markets. Here, we interpret the data behind the headlines, break down what's driving the economy and interest rates, and help serious investors make decisions rooted in clarity, not emotion. If you're looking for disciplined, research-driven insight to strengthen your portfolio, you're in the right place.
You know, I was looking at a competitor client deck last week, and there it was, splashed in giant, friendly, 90% blue text, 90% probability of success. It is the ultimate feel-good number in wealth management. But when you pull back the hood, it is a psychological mirage. People see that 90% and their brains just sort of shut down. They think, oh great, I have an A- chance of being totally fine in retirement. But what does that remaining 10% actually mean? It is not like getting a B on a spelling test. That 10% is the absolute apocalypse for your household. It means running out of money at age 78. If you look at Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky and their foundational 1979 work on decision-making under risk, they proved that we are hardwired to mistake this numerical precision for actual safety. A neat, precise-looking number ends the conversation before the harder, messier questions even get asked. We use the model to avoid talking about what a real market wreck actually feels like when you are living through it. We treat it like a weather forecast, but it is often just a statistical, comforting blanket. The real mechanical trouble with traditional Monte Carlo simulations is that they assume a fixed asset allocation and a stationary return distribution. They map returns onto a nice, smooth bell curve. But markets do not cooperate. As Benoit Mandelbrot documented over decades of price data, large moves occur far more often than a normal distribution predicts. This is what we call a fat-tailed distribution. Price changes cluster into calm periods and highly volatile periods. Some economists, like James Hamilton in his foundational 1989 paper, proposed treating markets as governed by hidden states, like calm or stressed, switching between them according to a Markov process. But regime switching is hard to build, and even harder to explain to a client, which is why most of the industry just sticks to the simple, misleading stationary models. When the market regime shifts, those static models become completely blind. Look at October 19th, 1987, Black Monday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted 22.6% in a single session. In a standard, normal distribution model, an event like that is mathematically projected to occur once every several billion years. It is an impossibility, yet it happened on a Monday. The Brady Report and later Federal Reserve retrospectives showed it was amplified by a mechanical feedback loop between falling stock prices and automated selling by portfolio insurance programs. The quantitative models had no mechanism for that feedback loop because nothing in the prior 20 years of rising asset prices resembled it. We saw the exact same movie in 1998 with long-term capital management. Run by Nobel laureates, their models assigned a near zero probability to a simultaneous flight to liquidity. But when Russia defaulted in August 1998, correlations failed everywhere at once, and a fund with over $100 billion in assets collapsed in days. 10 years later, in 2008, mortgage risk was priced using a Gaussian copula function. It assumed regional housing markets were uncorrelated, that a downturn in Florida would not coincide with one in Nevada. When the regime changed, national home prices fell, correlations converged, and the financial system nearly broke. Even in March 2020, the S&P 500 fell 12% in a day, VIX spiked to 83, and the Treasury market, the deepest and most liquid on Earth, locked up so badly that the Fed had to launch massive emergency interventions. The models failed because the world had changed, not because the math was wrong. At Universal Value Advisors, we do not throw probabilistic modeling out the window, but we treat it as just one leg of a wider stool. We complement it with intense historical stress testing, running the portfolio through the exact daily tape of 1987, 1998, 2008, and 2020. We use James Hamilton-style regime switching frameworks to recognize that calm and stressed states require different correlation assumptions, and we use custom scenario analysis paired with explicit options-based tail risk hedging. We accept that the extreme, unmodeled shock will happen, and we hedge for it directly instead of pretending the bell curve will save us. Even the regulators understand this. Large United States banks are required to formally document, validate, and challenge the assumptions behind their quantitative models under interagency supervisory guidance from the Federal Reserve, the OCC, and the FDIC, which was most recently updated in April 2026. Under the Basel III framework from the Bank for International Settlements, international regulators require institutions to hold extra capital against the risk that their models understate tail risk. These rules exist because supervisors learned the hard way in 2008 that any model needs a disciplined, independent check. Yet the wealth management industry, which is not subject to these same rules, continues to use Monte Carlo as a standalone verdict. I learned this lesson the hard way early in my career, right here in Reno. I built this beautiful, massive, multi-tab asset allocation spreadsheet with all the covariances and standard deviations. It looked absolutely flawless. I proudly showed it to my dad, Dr. Robert Barone, and he took out his red pen and redlined the entire thing. He did not even look at my formulas. He just said, "Josh, where is the correlation convergence? What happens to your safe assets when the correlation to your risky assets suddenly becomes 1? He reminded me that real wealth is engineered to survive messy human volatility, not just to look pretty in a client pitch. This is highly relevant today in late July 2026. Credit markets are living a version of this right now. Speculative grade default rates are climbing to roughly 4% in the United States, compared to a 20-year median of 2.9%. European defaults are at 4.6% against a 2.3% median. Private credit is facing its first meaningful credit cycle as a high-profile asset class, with 93% of managers in a recent PwC survey expecting flat or lower returns this year. The distressed ratio across the leveraged loan market rose to 8.89% in February, and payment-in-kind arrangements, where borrowers defer cash interest by adding it to principal, are rising fast under the surface. If your retirement plan is modeled on the low-rate, high-liquidity regime of the last decade, you are flying blind. We have to build portfolios to survive the real world, including the environments the models never sampled. That is my take. Talk to you next time.
Thanks for joining Joshua on Intelligent Investor Insights. If today's discussion raised questions about your portfolio strategy, risk exposure, or how to navigate this late-cycle environment, we invite you to connect with us. We work directly with investors who want data-driven guidance, institutional-level analysis, and a partner in building durable wealth. Reach out to start the conversation and take the next step toward becoming a more informed, confident, and resilient investor. Until next time, stay rational, stay disciplined, and invest with intelligence.